Hello and welcome to Expositions. This is our newly named interview series, which is put on by Cmntx Records. This is a series where we sit down and talk with the artists who are behind the music that comes out on our label. Today, I am very, very excited to be talking, first time face-to-face, with Mischa Falkenburg, whose recent EP, Vocal Explorations, came out on the label as our second release, first through the Interjection series, but second overall. So, really glad to be talking. Hello, Mischa.
Hello. Oh, okay.
It's all good.
I thought you were tipping something, you know.
No, I was saying hello to you.
Oh, okay.
How's it going?
Very good. So we're both here.
We're both here, and this is very, very monumental because this is also the first time you and I are talking face to face and with voices. It's mostly been email at this point. So I'm super excited to get into some of the stuff with you. So to begin with, your EP that you released with Cmntx Records, which is called Vocal Explorations, which has been out for a little bit now, has a very, very interesting backstory, at least from what I've heard. And I'd like to hear it from you, exactly where you were when you recorded this and exactly how you went about recording it.
Well, let's see. I would have been in an apartment in Massachusetts. Let me try to nail it down. I was probably in Arlington, and I was working for another record label. We won't name them. It's competition. Okay. And what I used for the source material for Vocal Explorations was something that I acquired on an employee purchase while I was there. So there were 3 different releases. One of the releases, which is the longest piece, called Holorin, that was from a release that the label itself put out. And then there was a Magindanao Chant, which was from a Folkways release. And then the third one was what I call Piece of Glass, which was Philip Glass's release that came out on Soho News. They put out an LP one time in 1981. And the record label was also a distributor for all kinds of independent labels at the time. So that's why they had the Folkways catalog, and they had this thing from Soho News, and among other things. So that was basically my source material. And then it was just a question of, well, for the example, with Magindanao Chant, it was, I think, a 7-minute segment originally. And I basically doubled it and then modified it by laying it over on itself like I did with everything else.
Right.
The most extreme was the Holorin piece, where the initial source material was 23 seconds, and we ended up with that 25-minute plus extravaganza, you know. But the
and the original sample for that's right at the beginning, right?
Well, it's not the initial call. The initial call was just an intro that was on the record. When it comes out as a duet, that's the original. So it would be the initial call, and then that was just to get people's attention, and then we went into the real stuff. But that became much more involved because the end results were a lot more interesting than the other 2 pieces, where the harmonics, the low end would drop out and the harmonics got increased. So you went from this 50 to 60-year-old guy to like the Vienna Boys Choir at the end, you know. And the cover is very misleading. People are expecting, you know, horns, and there's no horns on.
It's still a really cool picture though, so I think it accomplishes the job.
It's one of a kind. A guy snuck up on me while I was out there on the helipad, blowing my brains out, you know, and he gave me a copy.
And where was that photo taken?
That was at George's Banks out in the Atlantic Ocean. I was on an exploratory.
You spent time there like on an oil rig?
Correct? Yeah. I started when I lived in New Jersey briefly, and we were flying out of Atlantic City to the Baltimore Canyon, it was called. And it was all exploratory stuff. They had no real idea what was out there. And then they got the okay for the leases at George's Banks. So everybody that wasn't essential, like me, got off the rig, went back home, and they relocated the thing. In the meantime, I went up to Massachusetts, found an apartment. And so for that, we would fly out of Hyannis to what they called, George's Banks. And so I did that for 2 years of my life. And while I was out there, I wrote a lot of stuff because you eventually end up with a lot of downtime. And a whole series called Oceanic Musics. And it's initially scored for keyboard. I've never heard a note of it live. My wife has been after me recently to, why don't you try to do that? And maybe the label will put it out. And I said, well, I don't know. This is going to be a lot of work because my piano skills are not what they used to be when I was younger. So it would be a big process hitting one note at a time and editing out all the dead space. So if there's anybody on this in the stable on the label, it'd be interesting to take up a piano piece that's going to require a lot of stamina, some dexterity, not too much, but definitely a lot of physical stamina.
I was gonna say, this is the first I'm hearing of that.
Oh, it's the first I've told anybody.
I think if you had I think you would get a warm reception from us.
Well,
if you brought that up.
Well, I think the initial plan after Vocal Explorations is to do the environmental series, which is 3 separate pieces. There's Mountain Jungles, and there's Imaged Fairground, and there's Where's Perry for the Forgotten. And they take place at 3 different locations on the planet, one in the frozen wastelands, one in kind of an urban setting, and one in, obviously, mountain jungles. And those have horns. So something to look forward to.
Beautiful. Yeah. So kind of on that, with the picture when you're playing the horn, what is your musical background? Like, do you consider yourself an instrumentalist as well as a composer?
Well,
do you consider yourself one or the other? Just curious.
Well, the thing is, so my first instrument for lessons was piano. And that was 3 years, grade school, basically. I was the kid who got to play the opening music every morning in class. And then, of course, when the Beatles hit the scene, everybody wanted to play guitar. So I started taking guitar lessons for 3 years. Basically, the first teacher was, here's chords, here's how you learn chords, you play along. And it was basically folk-oriented. And then the second teacher, he was more into being able to actually read music and play it on the guitar. So eventually, when I was in high school, I did actually teach guitar for a while. And I had students of both kinds, those that only wanted chords and those that wanted to, sight read or whatever. And that lasted for a little while, but it was, it was easy money for a teenager. After that, when I was in high school, I self-taught myself tenor saxophone. So that meant I could be on the marching band and I could be in the pep band at the basketball games, exciting. Right? So there was that. And then while I was in high school, I had a theory harmony composition course, which was excellent, my senior year. And as I was walking through the instrument room before the classroom one day, I had always noticed there were these 4 cases sitting on the floor that never seemed to move. So I asked the professor, I said, what are those? He said, oh, those are bassoons. He says, nobody's playing bassoon. I said, okay. Well, I knew enough that the fingering for bassoon is the same as a tenor sax. I said, well, let me take it home this weekend and see what I can do. So that's what I did. So then I came back Monday and I said, okay, well, here's what I can do so far. And he says, okay, good. Now we can have a woodwind quintet. So you've got oboe and clarinet and bassoon and flute and the French horn. And we had some music in his file cabinet of Moravian folk dances, which were really interesting rhythmically and chordally. But the French horn player dropped out. She says, I don't think I can really handle this stuff. So there's no such thing as a woodwind quartet. I said, well, okay, not to worry. So that weekend, I went home, and I came back on Monday, which turned into the first movement of a 5-movement suite for the woodwind quartet, plus the rest of the ensemble, like orchestra ensemble. But I didn't write any percussion parts because those guys are hot dogs, and I didn't want to give them anything to do. So we had 2 actual rehearsals, and then a performance in the spring as part of the spring concert series for the high school. And there's a recording of that. I don't know that I'd ever want that to see the light of day. It was pretty brutal. So there was that. And then, of course, once you can play guitar, you can play any other, you can play bass, you can play mandolin, you can play balalaika. I had a grand aunt who had a balalaika. And every time we'd visit her, I would whip that thing off the couch and start playing it. And with the sax, any woodwind is fair game. So there's all that. And then there's my steel guitars. I have three of those. One's a lap steel. One is a console steel. That's a Fender on tripod legs that screw in on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a pedal steel that sits on the floor. And I'm self-taught on everything. A long time ago, I heard a guy gave a definition for an amateur. An amateur is one who does it for the love of it. So I thought, okay, I like that definition. I'll keep that. I used to have arguments with former roommates. They had gone to school and did the whole 4 years. I got kicked out of college, but they did the whole 4 years as music majors, had their general business band, and doing all those gigs and weddings and stuff like that. And he was in it, he saw a dollar sign in the future, and that's what he was for. And I said, why can't you just play for the fun of it? Why does it always have to be a paid gig? So anyway, but we played together later on, which is a whole nother story. This was while I was living in Arlington. This is before I got married, and which was in 89. So this would have been 86. Okay. It was a Sunday afternoon, and he came up to me and he said, do you feel like going to a jam session? Now, he had never, ever asked me anything like this before, so I was stunned, right? I said, well, what kind of music? He says, oh, it's kind of like a Grateful Dead jam band. I said, okay, well, that narrows down what instrument I'm going to bring. So I brought the console steel and my amp that we're hearing here in the background. So anyway, we went to this thing. And the leader of the band was a Harvard University student. My roommate at the apartment, he was a bass player. There was me. I ended up being the oldest guy in the band by 9 years. So the guy from Harvard was the lead. He also ended up writing a lot of tunes that we did almost primarily all original material by the end of the band. But at the beginning, there were Dead covers, there were Dylan covers, couple Elvis Costello tunes. The rhythm guitar player was from Tufts University. There was a guy that played harmonica and did background vocals. He was from Harvard. The keyboard player was the bass player's younger brother, who was also a Harvard student. And then we didn't have a drummer, but we had a guy that played congas. And that worked out okay. So we would play all the different houses in Harvard campus, or we would play outside. And any money we actually made got saved, so eventually we could try and book some studio time and get something a little more polished. Right. But I have boombox cassette recordings of every show we ever did, and those are the archives. The band was originally called Phantom Tollbooth, based on the children's book, and I was in a record store over by Berkeley, and I'm flipping through the miscellaneous, and I'm in the P section. All of a sudden, I see a record that says Phantom Tollbooth on it. I said, what? So I pull it out. Of course, I had to buy it. I still have it. It was a thrash band from New York City, a trio. I said, well, okay. So the next time we met, I said, guys, there's another band called Phantom Tollbooth, and I don't think we have the means to buy a lawyer and fight this. I said, so I have a suggestion. Now, I'm not the leader of the band, but I have a suggestion. Next time we play at Jack's, we put out a sheet of paper and a pencil on one of the tables and ask the audience to write down what they think our name should be. And then we'll look at the list later and we'll decide on our favorite. And that's who we'll be the next time we play out. So we ended up being 7 Ugly Men.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. There are 8 of us. So it was a lot of fun. It was fun. That lasted till just before I got married in 88 was the last gig. My tape stuff kind of lasted until even after I got married. The last thing I did was in 91. Mm-hmm. So that was basically it. I turned from a self-contained unit to playing with other people. And then it all stopped dead because I had a family and I got married and I have 2 sons and, everything just stopped, including the writing.
A lot of twists and turns.
Oh, yeah. A
lot of interesting gigs, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to ask about that. So the vocal exploration pieces were written like in the 80s, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. 82, 83. Yeah.
Okay. So what was kind of the life of those pieces? Because Alex found one of them via YouTube.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, like when you started or when you began
was he searching on Philip Glass or something? It must have been.
Yeah, he was looking. He was just he works for Philip
I
Glass's
know.
publisher, as I'm sure you're aware, and he just like really likes Philip Glass's music. So he
Mhm.
was like surfing through YouTube looking for Philip Glass stuff, and then
Okay.
he came across
Piece of glass.
the
Yeah.
piece, and he was like, "Huh, what is this?"
Yeah.
And then he listened to it, and then found you, and then reached out to you, and then the rest
Yeah.
is,
I
here we
don't
are.
know what time was involved there because I had all this stuff and I had put it on disc and get rid of it, put it on YouTube, just leave it. And then one day I
Hmm.
hear something, and instead of walking across the basement here and pulling it off the shelf, I said, "Oh, I'll just play it on YouTube." So I go to YouTube, and then all of a sudden I'm seeing comments. Who's leaving comments? And there was this comment from Alex, and of course I had to
Hmm.
check him out. Who is this guy? Is he for real? And I find out, okay, he's this young composer dude, and so I respond and I thank him for his comments, and then he mentions how he worked for Philip Glass, and in the back of my mind, it's like, uh-oh, lawsuit, because I didn't ask permission, right? And he says, "Oh, don't worry, the
Yeah.
publisher doesn't work that way." I said, "Okay, fine." So I dodged that bullet, And then some more time went on, maybe even 2 years. I'm not sure. And then he said, "I've got some friends. We're going to start a label, blah blah blah." And you know the rest of the story.
Yeah, it was really interesting how it just kind of fell in our laps too.
Yeah, I mean, I was stunned. So other than when I initially would do a piece, I would like make a cassette copy for a couple friends just so they could hear what I was doing, and that's as far as it ever went.
Hmm.
You know.
How much stuff do you have like sitting around like in the wings
Oh
since
man.
basically when you stopped doing it regularly once you got the family?
Oh well, there was everything that was on YouTube, and then there's all the stuff
Hmm.
that's never been heard or played. This is kind of where my question that I posted to you comes in is like, how do we define what a composer is? Because like for vocal
Yeah.
explorations, I'm more of an arranger or a technician or whatever. It's not like, okay, here's my goal. Here's what this piece is going to sound like. Here it is down on paper, hard copy. It's not. It was an
Yeah.
improvised process. And once it sounded good to me, then I was done. Hollerin didn't sound
Yeah.
good until it was 25 minutes long. You know.
For me, like I kind of went through the whole academic route
Mm-hmm.
of stuff. So when I started, maybe I had like a pretty rigid idea about what composition and what composers were. But I mean, really at this point, it's like anyone who makes music, whether it's through pen and paper or Logic or electronics or voice memos, like you're a composer if you're writing stuff.
Yeah.
At least to me. And even with like tape loop pieces, you're still manipulating like the source material in the same way like someone else might manipulate notes.
Well, sure.
So
Look at
to me, it's the same idea. Like even if it was just samples and stuff.
Yeah, that's how Steve Reich started out with tape. He had that "Soon It's Gonna Rain" and whatever. I forget the name of the other one, but that's yeah. I think you're right. And for me, I may have a vague idea about how I want something to go, like the stuff in the environmental series. I know, okay, I want it to portray a certain type of landscape. Of course, I admit I was influenced by Brian Eno, but I have this idea, and so I just tape my sounds and then say, okay, well, it's going to need this. You tweak it, but nothing I did ever had
Hmm.
effects. So because
Yeah.
of that, a lot of this generated stuff that I did, I would consider it almost improvising. And definitely when I was
Hmm.
in Phantom Tollbooth, Seven Ugly Men, even though it was basically, okay, let me know what the chords are, and I'll take it from there. So I never really
Hmm.
played a song the same way twice because of this jazz background. My dad was into big band. My mom was into bebop. It's just never left.
Yeah. A lot of it seems also like it was filling a niche that needed to be filled, even from the beginning of, oh, bassoon, no one else is playing this. And then,
Right,
oh, the French horn dropped out. We need music to play.
right, right. Yeah,
It's really very interesting journey.
yeah, yeah. It was fun.
Well, that's about all I
All
have.
right. Well, it's been real, Evan. Sorry about the technical difficulty. Yeah,
No, it's fine. And once we edit it together,
Mhm.
no one will even notice.
That's
So it'll be great.
and here we are talking about it. You could leave
Yeah.
that in, and they can say,
Maybe I'll edit this part out too.
What happened? Did something happen? We missed it." Yeah.
Yeah. It'll get people to go back and rewatch it. They're
Right.
like, oh, where's the
Exactly.
cut?
Exactly.
And that way we'll get like twice as many views.
There you go. Now
Beautiful.
you're thinking.
Yeah. Thank you for watching. And Mischa, again, thank you for being here.
You're quite welcome. Take care.
With that, we are at an end. I would again like to thank my guest, Mischa Falkenburg, for sitting down and chatting with me. It's been a lot of fun, so thank you, Mischa. In case you missed it, His most recent EP, Vocal Explorations, was released through Cmntx Records, and you can get it now at cmntxrecords.bandcamp.com. It really is an unearthed treasure, so I very highly recommend you go and listen. Somewhere around this video will also be links to any relevant pages of his, where you can stay up to date with what he has going on, or listen to music of his. Again, highly recommend you go and check that out. Thanks again for watching. Bye.